Hi friends, Miss Liz here again. Today we're making shortbread cookies or shortbread. We will be making today shortbread into cookies. Some people do this as a bar or as a crust. So actually this recipe that we're making today in cookie form, we will actually use for another class for the crust of our lemon bars. We have a nice shortbread crust underneath those. So this is actually the recipe that will be used for that as well. So, but these are absolutely delicious. If you like the typically decorated cookies at Panera, those are a shortbread cookie as well. These are very, very crisp, buttery and rich cookies. They are absolutely delicious and super simple. These can be done, like I said, as a bar in a pan. Makes a good crust for another dessert. You can do these as a drop cookie, which is what we're doing today, or if you want to put in a little extra effort, these can actually be rolled as well and used for cookie cutouts. We do these sometimes at Christmas. For my family, my children love to roll out these cookies. They give you a really crisp edge, really buttery and delicious, and they're fun to decorate as well if you do them as cookie rollouts. For today though, we're gonna be doing a drop cookie, so very, very simple. This is a very simple cookie. There are no leavening agents, no baking soda, no baking powder. It's just butter, flour, sugar, and salt. Very, very simple. If you're using salted butter, you can leave out the salt, the added salt. If you're using unsalted butter, then you definitely would want to add just that little bit. So to start with, we're gonna do 2 cups of flour. As always, remember when you're measuring flour to keep it light and airy. Don't scoop down heavy, packing it into your measuring cup. I recommend sprinkling it with a second scoop or very gently shuffle scooping, which means taking your scoop to the side and doing small motions to fill the scoop with loose flour and not packing it. So we're gonna start with 2 cups of flour. Just about there. Okay, 2 cups of flour. And this one, the process of mixing this recipe is slightly different than others. We're going to add the flour and the sugar together because this is the texture of it is different. It's more of a, the way it bakes up is more of a heavy, crisp texture. And so we're gonna add all of the sugar and flour in together. So what we're going to do is we're going to do 1/3 a cup of granulated sugar, just regular sugar, okay? 1/3. 1/3 granulated sugar, and then also 1/3 a cup of powdered sugar. Adding that powdered sugar is going to give us a little bit more of that nice shortbread texture than when we just use granulated sugar. So 1/3 cup of each of these is what we want, okay? So these are sweet, but not overly sweet. All right, 1/3 powdered sugar, okay? If you want a glaze for your shortbread cookie, you can make a really simple lemon glaze, which is powdered sugar and lemon juice, depending on how thick you want it. If you wanted a runny glaze that you can simply pour over the cookies, I would do about 1.5 cups of powdered sugar and 3 tablespoons of lemon juice. If you want it a little bit thicker so you can kind of pipe with it, then I would do just 2 tablespoons of lemon juice, and you could add a little bit more depending on what texture you were looking for. So I've added 1/4 a teaspoon of salt, just a teeny tiny bit. If you're using salted butter, you can omit that, leave that out. Otherwise, just 1/4 a teaspoon of salt gives it just a little bit of flavor. All right, so I have all of my powdered ingredients here, and we're going to stir this, and then we're gonna add our 2 sticks of butter. I'm just gonna reach over here and grab a fork. I'm gonna use a fork here and just gently mix these powdered ingredients together. And then I'm gonna take this 2 sticks of butter that's nice and soft and just break that up until we get a nice dough. You can absolutely do this with a mixer. It's very, very quick to do. My one recommendation would be careful not to overmix because you'll end up with tough cookies, and we don't want that. Okay. All right. Now, if your butter is pretty cool still, maybe it's soft, but it's still cool to the touch, so it's not overly soft, you may need to use your hands to finish fully incorporating the butter. Otherwise, you end up with more of a biscuit type base. The heat from your hands, when you manipulate dough with your hands, helps to soften that butter a little bit more. So it's pretty common if you're mixing by hand and not a mixer to need to do a little bit of kneading with your bare hands. That's what I'm going to do here. If you're using a mixer, if you just let it go for a few minutes, it will start to incorporate on its own. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm just gonna reach in, and all I'm doing is squeezing. Using my hand to squeeze, take a handful and squeezing it to kind of compress the butter in with those powdered ingredients. Okay, you'll notice it's going to start to pull together. Okay, this is a very dry cookie dough because we're making very crisp, crunchy cookies. All right, and as I said, this is also the crust that we'll use for lemon bars. It is very versatile. It's really delicious. Sometimes I'll use this recipe and also make bars, shortbread bars. And I'll just make this and then sprinkle on some M&Ms or some chocolate chips. I have a very simple chocolate coated on the top. All right, so you can kind of see now I have more of a cookie dough type consistency. It's a little bit crumbly still, but I can easily compress it, which is what I want. So now at this point, if you wanted to roll this out, you would lightly, very lightly flour your counter so that it doesn't stick. And then use a rolling pin, flatten it out, use your cookie cutters, and place on the pan. Today we're gonna do a drop cookie. Which literally just means we're putting dollops of cookie onto the pan like you would a chocolate chip cookie. But since this dough, it sets up really, really dry for our drop cookie instead of scooping, all you have to do is reach in and grab a handful, however big you want your cookie to be, roll it into a ball, just like that. And then I would flatten it so that it looks more like a pancake, just like that, okay? So before we do that, make sure your oven is on 350. Okay, and then we're going to spray our pan. You can use parchment paper. I have found with shortbread, I like that added crispness of having the extra oil on the bottom, and so I spray my pan. I bake with stones typically for cookies because it disperses the heat a little better. Lightly greased. You can absolutely do parchment paper. I just like that little bit of extra crispness that shortbread gets on the bottom from the extra oil. So you're just gonna make these little kind of like pancake type cookies. Be aware of how big you make that cookie is going to affect how long it takes for it to bake. So if you make them really large, I would recommend making all of them approximately the same size. Otherwise, you're going to have some that get done more quickly than others. If you want to make a bunch of large cookies, go for it. Absolutely, not a problem. Just be aware of how long they're going to take to bake. For these, for an average size cookie, I would say 10 to 12 minutes at 350. They should be done. These are a very fragile cookie. That means that if you try to take it off of the pan while they are still hot, they will fall apart. So wait until they've had a chance to cool a little, 5 to 10 minutes, before moving them to a cooling rack. They will not fully set up until they are completely cooled. So they will still be crumbly and fragile until they have completely cooled down on the cooling rack. So be aware of that. If you think, oh, why are my cookies falling apart? They have to be completely cool to set up nice and crisp. Okay, just like that. Once our pan is full, then we'll stick it in the oven. I usually set my timer for about 10 minutes so I can check them. You'll know they're done when the edges have a slight golden color and the top of them should not be shiny or glossy or still look wet. It should have a nice matte, dry looking finish. Okay. As always, if you have questions, feel free to send me a message, post in the classroom. Posting in the classroom offers your classmates also an opportunity to ask questions or tag on to what maybe you were wondering, they may be wondering as well. So that's a great opportunity to have some discussion with your classmates. All right, so I have my cookies here, just very simple. I'm gonna put those in the oven, 10 to 12 minutes, and they should be good. Have a good evening. Goodbye.